I'm a big fan of the list idea for organizing our prompts. So as we get into this kind of second phase of like starting to save off your prompts, starting to organize them in some way, getting back to them is important. And like was mentioned here in the comments, OneNote is great for that because of the search. We also have the search capability in lists. And what I like about lists, I'm just kind of a database minded type of guy. So I like the idea of like each one of these is an object and that object has attributes, right? So I'm kind of building like an index, if you will, of prompts. And this is what we put together based off of the feedback from our users in our own early access program. So when we were very early on, we had maybe 50 people. They talked about like it'd be nice to have like a share a prompt channel or something like that. So I had put together this prompt library and I've like moved this over to my MVP tenant now so I can demo it. But essentially, I was thinking in terms of like, how can I get like almost like a form to fill out or something like that so that I could take advantage of the search capabilities in lists, but also the filtering and organizing type of capabilities. So, what I did for a very basic list here is I've got what is the prompt? What's the description of the prompt? Like, why is it good? What's it good for? Those types of things. And then I've just got some tags for it. And what that is helpful for is doing some organization, right? I don't necessarily want to have like a whole bunch of like different columns for filters. I kind of like the idea of keeping things flat and just doing like tags and that's it. So I've got like things tagged for like what is the application. I've also got thing like a tag for like meetings, right? And what's nice is if you tag it, you can filter by it. So I can be like, all right, I'm in a meeting. I want to just see the meeting ideas. So there's all of the prompts from my prompt library that I could kind of pull out of my toolbox to use during a meeting, right? So those are some ideas as far as tagging. And what I like also about the list concept is you can have something called a rating column. So it's a little bit down here. It's the average rating, and that gives you like a 1 to 5 star or a 0 to 5 star rating. But you can change that instead of a rating, you can change it to a like column. And that gives you basically the concept of an upvote by clicking on the heart. You're basically saying, I like this, and that adds a little bit of community to the prompt library for your organization because you can then sort by, the number of likes and have your most popular ones up there at the top like that. So I like kind of infusing a little bit of community to it. I can store the list in a SharePoint site, and that SharePoint site could be the SharePoint site that is attached to your either Microsoft Team or Viva Engage community. That is your Copilot community. We talked at Teams Nation a couple weeks ago about building your M365 Copilot community and how important that is. An aspect of that community is a engaging and collaborative prompt library so that you can, build a knowledge base. And I'm a big advocate personally just of doing that in Microsoft lists. Now, the you're leaning a little bit more into like the pure collaboration world with Loop and building a Loop workspace. So I'm interested to see what you've kind of mocked up with Loop components because what I've done is like here's a list. There's a little bit of like I'm thinking of governance, right? I could make it so that I could have custom views. I could not allow people to submit it to a list. I could do like an approval workflow with Power Automate and kind of, like not just like open it up to everybody. But if you want to be more organic about it, you can certainly use Microsoft Loop. And before I kick it over to you, Andy, for workspaces, one thing I do want to point out for those who are kind of new to Microsoft Loop is eventually, as you mature, you may have a workspace that is your prompt library. That's what Andy's going to show. But along what was mentioned here with OneNote, if you go to loop.microsoft, you have the idea area. That could be your personal prompt library. So you may start out with Loop and just capturing things to get them out of your brain and put them somewhere. you could basically kind of graduate this into a workspace and create your organizational workspace off of your own idea. So I kind of wanted to mention that as well, because I think the ideas area of Loop is a little bit overlooked sometimes, that like that's kind of your personal notebook. So are you ready to take us through what you've mocked up in Loop Workspaces?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
So, um, just basically like looking at the workspaces, I've just created one specifically for this demo, in this demo environment. But we dive into it. I've got a section here for prompts, and then I got a section for resources. What I like about the workspace is that I can do the list based form factor, like John was just talking about,
Mhm.
but I can also append that with additional information, resources, and other content, and create essentially one stop shop. But then circling back to the ideas, I could take this thing that we've created right over here, turn it into a component, and then share it with other people in a number of different ways. Send it to them through email, as part of a Teams chat. Send it to them in a Word document. Give it to them so they can put it in their OneNote notebook, and so forth. So there's a number of different places that I can reuse this. But I've essentially done the same thing you've done. I've created a table, a list inside of my page. For me, I'm
Mhm.
capturing the prompt that was used, organizing it by app. So I'm just tagging it here, by the app that it was used. I'm capturing, in this case, the contributor. Sometimes knowing who contributed can add weight to it. If we wanted to, we could capture the number of uses. Haven't figured out really a way to automate this one yet. I know we just got some automation with Loop recently, so maybe there's like a Power Automate that we could run on that. But I did do a rating inside of here, so people can come in and they can rate it as it's used. So as I share the workspace or the component, people could rate this, and
Mhm.
we could use that as a way to kind of filter.
That's
Um,
called a voting column, right?
yeah, this is a voting
Okay.
column that I
Yeah.
applied here. Yep. And I'm just using this to capture some of the prompts that I've used, and it makes it easy for me to go through if I need to. Um, we can kind of drill down to certain prompts, insert additional columns, sort ascending or descending. But at a very quick glance, I can see, oh, this is going to apply to Microsoft Word. Here's the prompt that was used, copy and paste, and then you can move on. The cool thing is, though, if you turn it into a component, you can put it in the document that maybe you're drafting, refer to it as you're in the process of drafting the document, and make
Mhm.
it available that way. So just grabbed a simple table here inside of Loop, and I've got that going. Another thing I think is really cool, down at the bottom, it's giving me some auto totals. So like it's telling me
Mm.
there's a couple, two for Word, one for PowerPoint, one for Excel, one for Outlook. And I'm not having to create the totals in order to do that like I would have to in a list. It's only a couple of extra steps in the list, but I like that that's there by default. It's also telling me who the top contributor is right down here at the bottom. But
I
not only
like
do I
that. That's
get,
a way to gamify it a little bit, right? You could
yep.
have who the top contributors are. So, because the next thing we're going to talk about, or one of the things in the future, is what's been going around LinkedIn for the past day, and there was like a leaderboard that was built into that.
Mhm.
So this kind of gives you a little bit of that, of who are your top contributors, so you could start maybe identifying some champions out of your group.
Here's the I really like that piece of it, the gamification of it. But here's the
Hmm.
thing that I think really starts to separate Loop from just a standalone list. I could use the standalone list as is. I could tab it into a team. I could put it on a SharePoint page. And if I did that, I
Hmm.
could add other content to it. But here on the Loop page, I can go right away and start adding additional content. So I can
Yeah.
add additional references. I can pull content from other pages. Maybe I can use Copilot and have it draft a page summary and tell me which prompts are the most popular and what application is the most popular, and do some of that.
Yeah.
But the main thing is all of these other Loop tools are now available as part of this page in this Loop workspace. And so I can go beyond just the table to maybe an explanation, maybe providing a link, maybe referencing a video, and I can
You can
start to
embed
really
that
branch
do's
out
and
and show more.
don'ts. Yeah, embed the image of that do's and don'ts from
Mhm.
the prompt engineering from the adoption kit. I like that. It's more flexible that way because of the
Yeah.
different types of media you can put in there.
But if I need to, I can convert it into a component. And now this becomes reusable in Teams, in
Hmm.
Outlook, in Whiteboard, in Microsoft Word. So now I can take this and I can go into other places. So in this particular example, I'm putting my prompts by all in one table and then tagging it with an app. But what if I created a separate table that's just for Word? I could share just that table for word-based prompts with someone, and then they can consume it wherever they need. For example, if we want to put it in OneNote, bam, there you go. There's a set of prompts that are specific to OneNote. It's a OneNote or specific table, and now you've got that information, and you can go from there.
Hmm. Interesting. So I do like that. I'm curious what you would use the rest of the workspace for, right? Because you could have like the prompt library, it's a page, but yeah, maybe you would not have the workspace be the prompt library, but have the workspace be like level up your Copilot skills or
Yeah.
something, and the prompt library is like a component of that, and then the other resources, like here's the classes we have, you embed some like some stream or some YouTube videos in there. Here's the like important links, you embed like the adoption kit, the tech community.
So I
So
really
maybe
like
you make it
the
an adoption workspace.
I really like where you're going with that. And I think it could be a really cool use case to have maybe a workspace that's an introduction to Copilot, an
Hmm.
introduction to basic prompts, an explanation of more advanced prompts, and then a prompt library where you can come back and revisit. And you're turning that information into something that's reusable, kind of like a garden. And as you feed it, it's going to grow and more people can
Hmm.
onboard to it down the road. And because it's Loop, it's reusable. So we can bring it into other areas where users might be working. And that kind of touches base with like there's a few different methodologies when it comes to like note taking and personal knowledge management, team based knowledge management.
Hmm.
And one of those is a garden, and a garden is basically it's not something that's ever really finalized or complete. You go back and you nurture it, you water it, you plant new seeds in it, and then it grows into something else. And I think Loop really has the ability to do that. I love lists. I think lists are great, and there's a certain use case for it. But in this particular situation, I like the loop aspect to it because I can bring in other information, and I think this is a good time to kind of talk about some of that information. We'll circle back to the GitHub prompt library in a minute, but
Okay.
in my notebook, I've added in a section for resources. So sharing resources is really important, but sometimes in Microsoft Teams, if you've got a community where you're sharing information, it can get lost in the various channels and conversations. It's kind of hard to who said this and where did they say it? Was it in a private chat, one on one, or small group? Was it in a channel? Where was that information? Was it tabbed in? It can be hard. So in this case, I've got prompts right over here as a table, a component, and then I've got a list of resources. There's the link to the Microsoft Adoption Success Kit. There's a link to the blog for what's new in Copilot, and I'm bringing that to whoever the audience of this particular notebook is. Um, and then some other information that can be really helpful. Since we're talking about prompting, and we're talking about organizing promptings, one of my biggest resources is the Microsoft service descriptions. This tells you specifically what you can expect each of the Copilot experiences to do. And that's one of the adoption hurdles is users hear the magic of Copilot. It can do anything. It's AI, it's super powered. But
Hmm.
in the Copilot world, there are guardrails. There are some things that it can do, and then there's some things it can't necessarily do. And having the service descriptions, but also having the service overview for each of the different apps and experiences can really help you to help users understand how to temper their expectations and work within it. So I provide that as a resource in our communities when our users are onboarding. I can now bring that right into um, this workspace, this Loop workspace, and I can make it familiar to those users and make it available to them. If you haven't seen the descriptions, we'll make sure to post this into the chat, the various chat windows. But this is what like feature availability for Copilot. I always share this with anybody that's kind of onboarding, but also share this in like workshops and things that I deliver, because this helps the users to really understand what to expect out of Copilot. And we're going to come back to this in just a second, but I just want to make sure I get that out into the chat window for anybody who might be interested in that. So give me 1 second to grab that link.
Hmm. So yeah, I'm curious. I put a prompt on the screen for you guys who are watching. Like, now that you've kind of seen examples of both, like what are you leaning toward, lists or Loop? Right. I've got two people have posted there. They're leaning more towards the list side. One, Denise had an interesting idea. She said that um, her reasoning around lists is the attachment idea. Like maybe you want to attach a very, very long prompt, so you could be able to do that, or you could attach examples or something like that. That's kind of an interesting idea I hadn't thought about on the list side of things. Fairy Geek Mother says that she's, more familiar with lists over Loop. I think for me, I'm looking at like, so I'm going to be doing like a little bit of a prompt library for an event that I have coming up in San Francisco in like 4 weeks. I think I might try the Loop idea because we're gonna collaboratively build a prompt library just for that particular use case. Um, I've done lists in the past. I think I'm gonna try Loop and see how that works with my cohort of people that I'm working with on that. But yeah, that's an interesting idea. It looks like you can do pretty much what I was doing, at least, where it was like you got upvoting, you got the prompt, you got the tagging, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, I'm curious if anybody else like has like what Denise mentioned about like attachments or something. Like, is there some special thing that we missed about either one of those tools? Cool. So that covers those two things. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we take a look at the newest hot off the presses idea that we saw on LinkedIn yesterday? Okay, she said it works now.
All right, awesome. I think that covers most of what we wanted to capture here. So let's show the hot off the press item that
Okay.
we wanted that we mentioned. And keep in mind, like none of this is like definitive. Like we're showing you what the options are, the things that are out there, just to give you some ideas. But one that came up recently from Eric Olson, who is a Microsoft
Yeah, there we go.
teammate. He posted this on his LinkedIn recently. I think it was like yesterday or the day before, and I shared it with John because this was really timely. We were just talking about this as
Mhm.
we were putting together our list and putting together our Loop tables, our Loop workspaces. This popped up, and I was like, "Oh man, this is like right along with what we were talking about." Um, he has released an app called Prompt Buddy, and it's actually built on top of Power Apps. Behind the scenes, I imagine there's some lists that power it. But with Prompt Buddy, you can organize by app, you can view your top contributors, you can view your top prompts, and you can view the new prompts, and you can see that there's a voting context that's built into it. They've done a great job of the UI. I think it looks awesome, and
Yeah.
this is a way to gamify the process that kind of does some of the same things that we were talking about with the two components that we created. This is currently available on GitHub, so you can go out there and you can grab Prompt Buddy from GitHub. But it's a
Mhm.
Microsoft Teams based Power App, and it uses Dataverse. So you can create this. Now, full disclosure, I haven't had a time or time to install it and put it through the paces myself. On the surface, it looks really awesome. I just need to install it and see what the installation process looks like, and then use it a couple times to see what that's going to look like. Uh, But we thought this was really cool. We just wanted to share it, and maybe if we have some time to go through it in a future deep dive, we'll take a look at it more in depth.
Yeah, I'm curious if you guys are interested in seeing a little bit more about Prompt Buddy, or if you'd like us to try in a deep dive, like installing it and just see what happens. Because we just learned about it, like I said, yesterday, and it's really topical for what we're talking about today. But I think it's really interesting. I just put the link to it in the chat for you guys. So yeah, just looking at the GitHub here, I just kind of want to scroll through and look at some of the installation. So it looks like it's best to do it as they recommend installing it as an app in Teams as an unmanaged solution. So like do it as like a one of those side loaded apps inside of Microsoft Teams. It could take like a couple of minutes to do that. Says if this is the first Power App, so it is going to create a Dataverse instance. So, I mean, I'm terrible at the Power Platform, Andy, but that would tell me that it's not or it's not SharePoint list behind the scenes, right? It's going to do a proper Dataverse
Yeah,
like database, right?
yeah, it's Dataverse
So,
behind the scenes.
okay. So, I mean, that's good. That's probably like more scalable and more supportable, for like a somewhat, decent size enterprise if you're doing that. But yeah, so that seems like it's pretty easy. I'm gonna look at the installation demo because I just want to like see what he's going through here. So it's also Stuart, Ethan and Stuart together from Microsoft have put this together and been talking about it on their different
Eric and Stuart.
LinkedIn's. Oh, Eric and Stuart. Sorry, I thought Ethan. I don't know
Yeah.
why I messed that up. So yeah, he's essentially importing this. It's creating that Dataverse connection, and then he's going through. So he's got it imported into his apps in Power Apps, and I imagine then so it's going to set up the connections to Teams, and then they're going to publish that out to a Microsoft team. So if you're going to do it like in a Viva Engage community, I assume you would just do it from a Power App itself, like a standalone Power App, and then you could pin that as a resource in your Viva Engage community as well. So they're saving that, they're creating it so it's got a channel, and then I assume they're probably going to add a tab to, yeah, they got a tab for that particular Power App to load up. You select what team. Okay, so you can even like add like different teams. So I guess you could have like this department has a prompt buddy, this other one has a prompt buddy. Maybe you've got like a all company prompt buddy. That would be pretty interesting because then you could kind of like have one to rule them all. Like, in my enterprise where there's 400,000 people, we'll probably have like, 65,000 prompt buddies floating out there. It might be best to make one and then, like have them work through some, COE, like a center of excellence or something to maybe get another prompt buddy team created, you know? And then that way you could kind of expose that slice of it to some subgroup of users. But yeah, you can organize it so you can browse by app or by department or by persona too. So maybe you could load in, yeah, like if you're a consultant, if you're a nurse, if you're, uh, whatever, accountant or something like that.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
this looks
polished.
pretty sweet.
Yeah, we'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I want to deploy that and test it out. So I'm curious, anybody in the chat, have you guys tried this yet? I mean, it seems like it's brand spanking new, so I can't imagine a lot of people have. But
Or
I do
do
love
you
the
have an
icon too.
internal solution that you're currently working with? We would love to hear about it and what you're doing for some of uh,
Yeah.
your prompt sources.